laptop. Might work. All right, okay, good. So, class, today is the last day to submit your, to submit your projects for research day, right? So, by the way, over the weekend, I came up with a nice little project that I think you guys might like this. And I'll give you this little preview while I'm restarting my laptop. It has to do with, okay, so there is this concept, right? And so, for example, Black people in the United States have suffered with this over decades. There is this concept where people from another race, they all look the same. So crimes are committed. And then, of course, because the police are lazy like everybody else, police are just people, right? Right? All right. You watch these movies. I watch these Indian movies. You see them beat the daylights out of the suspect, right? Same thing happens in Jamaica. Same thing happens in Jamaica. Beat the confession out of the suspect, right? Right? Same thing happens in the US. But it happened in Guantanamo Bay. You guys know where Guantanamo Bay is? Okay. Hold on. You know what? Let's just figure out something. Let's figure out something. Let's just figure out something. We'll just use Zoom on your phone too. Oh. Today. All right, very good. I just figured out something that the team might be useful. All right. Go. No. No, I'm not gonna meet it. Why can't I connect to the network? All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Can you guys hear me?
Oh. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. So
I'd love to put the sound on.
yeah.
So police are lazy all over the world. And can you guys downstairs hear me?
Can the
people downstairs hear me? Should be able to hear me. All right. So people are lazy all over the world, right? And so police all over the world have beat confessions out of suspects. They grab somebody who looks like the person, the suspect who was described. Black guy wearing red shirt was seen robbing a store, right? So they drive down the road and they grab the first black guy with a red shirt, right? No, don't talk like me, Don't talk like me. Because you're, I'm a risk taker, right? All right. So anyway, So for decades, black people have suffered this situation where somebody describes a suspect and they just grab the first person who looks like that person. Now, people always talk about eyewitness testimony, and they think eyewitness testimony is the greatest thing ever, right?
But I could have simply done this long ago. Oh, actually, never ever need my phone. All right. Anyway. All right. Anyway, so as I'm talking through this, Yeah. Sometimes it's true that I forget. But, all right. All right. So anyway, all right. So the people downstairs should be in favor. All right. So the point is, to give you some context. So eyewitness testimony is not reliable. People say, I saw it with my own 2 eyes. That's unreliable. Experts have testified to the fact that eyewitness testimony doesn't work. This is why they came up with things like forensic evidence. Right? Everybody know what forensic evidence is. What do we mean by forensic evidence? What kind of evidence is forensic evidence? What kind of evidence? Tell me. Fingerprints. DNA. Yeah. Fingerprints, DNA. Fibers. This kind of thing. Yeah. That's it, right? All right. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, I don't know why is this muted, but it's still, sound still comes through. Because the volume is on. So that's why. Because the volume is on. All right, anyway. All right. All right. So anyway, so I'm working on this little project now. And the project is showing that neural networks will have a higher accuracy. Okay. All right. Okay. So the idea is eyewitness testimony is unreliable because everybody from another race, the people from another race, they all look alike. No, this may sound racist, but it's reality. This has been scientifically proven. People from another race, they all look alike. Yeah? And the men and women from another race, they look more similar than the men and women in your race. Make sense? In other words, the distinction between masculinity and femininity gets blurred for another race. It's a wider gap for your race. It's a smaller gap for another race. And then the people look more alike for another race than for your race, right? Because you've grown up seeing the different distinctions No.
No.
So I came up with this
little project.
Are you gonna
like this project?
You're
You're gonna like this little project, right?
I
I wish I could connect my laptop to the network. But
I
I have the data on.
I do
have the data on
I do actually have the data
on
I do actually have the data
on
I have
the data on the network.
All right, so I'm going to show you the data. Right? As I'm having trouble connecting to. I'm having trouble connecting to the I'm having trouble connecting to the network on my laptop. Very cool. So over the weekend, I spent some time collecting some data. Now, it's not a lot of data, but it's 1,000 pictures. And I'm actually thinking that I'm going to write a paper. Anybody who is interested in joining can join me on it. All right. And here's a basic idea behind the paper. Is that I have 1,000 records, right? Which is a small number of records for 7 celebrities. So in other words, I have about 100 to 150 pictures for each celebrity, right? All right, cool. That's a very small number, especially faces, right? Because remember, faces have the same basic shape, right? Faces have the same basic shape. When you see a face, you say, oh, person. It's different from horse versus cat. Yeah, horse and cat look very different. Human faces look very similar. So the idea is just detecting that it's a human face is fairly hard. Determining which face is much harder. Everybody with me? Cat versus dog is easier than person 1 versus person 2. Yeah? Right? Because the shapes are different. Right? And one of the things, that you should learn from this whole class on deep learning is that the human mind is infinitely smart. Everything is going against me today. Everything is against me today. I'm up. A phone just ran out of battery. Everything is against me today. Everything is against me today. I did something to somebody. Something bad to somebody, right? I did something bad to somebody, right? Oh, I don't know. Today is not my day. Today is not my day at all. All right. All right. So anyway, so the point is this, right? Human beings are infinitely smart, right? And as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you two videos where my phone is charging, right? Let's talk about something else while my phone is charging. That's one thing about me, I'm not that professor who's, when things go wrong, I'm just gonna give up and say, oh, let's go home. No, that's not happening. You came here for a lesson. I'm gonna give you a lesson. You're gonna get your money's worth today, one way or the other. I'm gonna give you your money's worth. All right. So this is how smart the human brain is. Brain is so smart that it can distinguish between aunt and mommy. Yeah. Right. Right. Face covered. See that? Face covered. Still knows mommy. Yeah. Face covered. Still knows mommy. See that? Okay, but this is the first time doing it. Okay. The mom is actually two people, right? Uh-oh. Right? 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 Daddy and Uncle Daddy, right? 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 So the point is, oh, there's two Indian ladies. Right? All right, now give the baby a month or two. Now, you have to understand something about human beings, though, is that we're driven by survival. And I tell people all the time, right? I tell students all the time, for example, that take, for example, here's why you have to read things multiple times to really know it. If you really want to study something, really know it well, right? Then you have to read it many times. You have to read it many times because memory depends on repetition. When you repeat something, when you read something repeatedly, it's like your brain telling your brain. Because here's the thing, I'm teaching you with a lot of stuff today, right? Because today is more like today is because today's lesson is not working out so great. So the point is, you have three cells. You have the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is your basic survival self. It's that flight or fight self, right? The id is the thing that when somebody says something offensive, you want to fight. You don't want to fight or you want to run away. The id is the survival part of it. The ego is your normal self. And then your super ego is your higher self, your highest self. It's a self that wants to serve others, help others, be good to everybody around you, be unselfish, do everything for everybody else first, right? So you have the id at the basic level, or they call it the reptilian brain, the survival brain. That's the brain that's driven by They have what you also call the amygdala. It's the base of your skull, right? You have your forebrain, right? Which does the thinking, and then you have the amygdala, which is directly connected to your spine, and that deals with survival. It's driven by adrenaline, flight or fight, right? Flight or fight. Yep. All right. So the point is that you have three cells. You actually have three cells. If you ever feel conflicted, like I want to get up out of my bed and go to class, no one wants to sleep. That's two of your cells talking to each other. Right? You think, okay, I want this last piece of biryani. No, I'm gonna leave it for my cousin. Again, that's your two cells talking. Two of yourselves talking. If you feel conflicted, that's two of yourselves in discussion with each other, right? You can't decide what to do. You have two cells, maybe three cells talking, right? Now, there's no shame in this, you know. People think three cells. That sounds crazy. It sounds like a mad person. I'm only one person. No, you're three people inside it. You have your highest self, you have your lowest survival self, you have your middle self, which is your normal everyday self, right? All right, good, good. So the idea is you have three cells, right? All right, very cool. Shut it down again. They have these three cells. One is driven by adrenaline, and one is the spiritual self. When you go to temple or a mosque or church, you're feeding your spiritual self, your highest self, right? The self that wants to be good to all mankind, right? All right, very cool. So where does this all fit now? So you have these three different cells. And I forget what it has to do with twins. But the point of twins is that your brain is extremely smart. That even as a baby, you can tell the difference between. All right, okay, I'm going to tie it all together. And you guys can actually see what I'm saying, right? So you have your three cells. Right? When you have a conversation, when you feel conflicted, right? Id, lowest self, driven by adrenaline. Right? Right? Ritual, unselfish. All right, cool. So you have a conversation between your three selves. And one says, I want the best grade. I want to be the best in the class so I can serve mankind, humankind, right? And the other one says, I want to watch Salar, right? I want to be lazy and watch Salar, right? Right? So there's a conversation between your id that wants to watch Prabhas, right? Putting down a whole heap of guys, right? Whole heap of bad guys or whatever, right? So one part of you wants to see Prabhas beat up a whole heap of guys, and the other part wants you to become the best student in the class, right? And learn deep learning so you can serve mankind, right? Very cool. Very cool. Now, what does this have to do with twins? What does this have to do with twins? So the point is, to learn something, you have to repeat it. You have to repeat it a lot. It's your superego telling your ego what to do. Yeah. So your superego says, so your id says, I want to watch Salar. Your superego says, I want to study deep learning. I want to learn more about deep learning. I want to train some more deep learning networks, right? Because the more time I spend training deep learning networks, is the better I can get at it, right? So that's a conversation between yourself. Okay, what does this have to do with twins? Wow, babies and twins. Well, the baby knows it, the mom by repetition. That's how the baby knows the mom. This baby can tell the mom and the auntie apart because it's seeing the mommy 1,000 times and associates each of those 1,000 times with what? What does the baby associate mommy with? No, let's break it down a little. We're not as smart as we think, right? We're higher animals. We're smart because we're extremely well guided, right? Baby associates mommy with food. Come on, you know I'm right. Baby knows every time it's hungry, it cries, mommy comes, feeds it. Yeah? So baby associates mommy with survival. Baby associates 1,000 feedings, been fed 1,000 times by mommy. It's never been fed by auntie. So baby doesn't associate auntie with food. Baby associates mommy with food through the 1,000 times that mommy fed it. Right? And this is why you have to study things 5 times to really understand it. Memory requires repetition because it's your higher self telling your lower selves that this is important to survival. See that? That's it. That's the connection. This baby can tell mommy apart from auntie because the baby has seen mommy 1,000 times and got food from mommy. You know a subject very well because you studied, right? Because your super ego tells your ego that the fact that you've seen this so many times means it's important to survival. Same thing with the baby and mommy. Repetition. Seeing things many times makes you know it because you're associated with survival. And that's what mommy teaches you. So say we came full circle. You wondered how all of this discussion about Freud and psychology had to do with deep learning. Yeah. Same thing with deep learning. The model sees the data for 15 epochs, 20 epochs, 50 epochs. Epochs is just repetition. Right? Epochs is just repetition. So now you know the connection between psychology, babies and twins, and deep learning. The other point is our brains are extremely good at recognizing things, right? To the point where even though a deep learning network struggles to know one face different from another, right? A baby can tell 2 extremely similar faces apart. Yeah. All right. Very cool. Yeah. So the point is your brain is a lot smarter than it is. But at the same time, repetition is involved. Repetition is involved. Through repetition, the baby has been able to notice the distinguishing features of mommy's face over and over and over again, many, many, many times. Yeah. And as a result, knows who is mommy and who is a stranger, right? Now, up to this point, by the way, the reality is that auntie at this point is just a stranger, somebody else, right? The fact that auntie looks like mommy probably means very little to the baby. All right. I just had this, I don't know, not a great idea what we're gonna do this. All right. We're having all kinds of great ideas today. All right. So let's come back to this idea that eyewitness testimony is pretty bad, right? Because even though a baby can tell a mother and an aunt apart, the truth is that, and this has been scientifically proven, the truth is people of a different race look the same to us. And that's a scientific fact. Those races, what is fact? It's been scientifically proven, right? We can look at it. We can right? The other race effect on eyewitness identification. The other race effect on eyewitness identification. So both the folklore of social perception and the laboratory data. So the laboratory data, in other words, this is people who have studied it, lend support to the existence of an other race effect. Meaning they've studied this in a laboratory, right? Right? They all look alike to me, right? Effect. Meaning black people think all white people look the same. Indians think all Chinese look the same. Chinese think all black people look the same. All right, not really. Not really. A lot depends on your exposure. Like, for example, if you had Indians in your neighborhood growing up, right? If you're Indian and you had white people in your neighborhood, right? If you're black and you watch Chinese movies, etc., then you learn to recognize faces from other races, right? You learn to recognize what are the distinguishing features. But science has supports the fact that people of other races tend to look very similar. Okay, so anyway, so what does this have to do with what we're doing here? So it turns out over the weekend, I was collecting some data. How you gonna look? I was collecting data on 7 celebrities. One is Jamaican Usain Bolt. Anybody know Usain Bolt? One was Usain Bolt. Fastest man in the world. Yeah, he's Jamaican, right? World record 9.58, right? Guy's a beast. Yeah. Yeah. All right. The other one is Lucy Lawless. Right? New Zealand actress and director. This is the weirdest thing because she's actually quite successful. She was in Battlestar Galactica. And this is ungratefulness, this is ungratefulness. I collected her pictures of her face because of you. Right? And you don't know her. Horrible. She's actually quite successful. And she's actually no. What I want to know if people are successful, I look up their net worth. Right? That's an objective measure of their success, right? No, she's actually quite successful. She was in Battlestar Galactica, which is my favorite science fiction show of all time. She's a Cylon, which is a robot. You know Battlestar Galactica? Oh, so she's a robot, right? She's a Cylon. She's an AI, right? Interestingly enough. Then the other person is, I did this for Darius. Right? I collected pictures of him. Right? That's the third person. Right? Then I also collected pictures of Kate Blanchett. Right? She's my favorite actress. She's also in this show called Black Bag. Great spy show. Pretty good spy show. Some nice twists, right? So that's the fourth person. The fifth person I collected is my favorite Indian actor, Amitabh Bachchan. Now I gotta tell you one thing about Amitabh Bachchan that I realized by collecting pictures. So he's a North guy, right? One thing I realized about Amitabh Bachchan, the guy looks the same, right? And that's just the truth. The guy just always, he really is a fairly bored looking guy. I mean, he's a good looking guy, but I mean, he has like absolutely no variety to his looks, right? He can act though, right? Great actor, but he always looks the same, literally, right? This guy just never changes his hairstyle. With all that money, you think he could get different haircuts, right? But he just really loves his hairstyle, right? So that's actor number 5. Actor number 6 that I collected was Prabhas, right? See the smiles really coming out now, right? And then, guess who was the last actor? Last actor was Vijay. So I trained this deep network, right? I trained this deep network, and I really wish I could show you, but my laptop is not connected to the connecting, right? But train this deep network, and here's a very interesting thing. At one point, before I change the network, before I tune the network, I was getting accuracy somewhere in the 20s, right? For all 7 actors. For all 7 actors, I was getting accuracies in the 20s. But then, when I checked the accuracy, so I decided, okay, I'm going to just look at 2 categories. And the 2 categories were Kate Blanchett. I tried to find the people who I thought would look the most different. And the people I chose were Kate Blanchett and Idris Elba. I mean, anybody could tell these people apart, right? I mean, there's no way you would confuse the 2 people together, right? Yeah, Kate Blanchett. Right? Yeah, Kate Blanchett and Idris Elba, right? Now, turns out they actually did confuse some of the pictures together, but with the same network that was only achieving an accuracy in the 20s, once I switched to just these two categories, the accuracy shot up to 80%. Right? So I thought to myself, I'm gonna do a paper where I compare, where I use the same network, right, on people of the same race, and compare how it does against people of different races. And that is going to build on this theory of the influence of race on eyewitness memory, right? They all look alike effect. Intergroup biases and eyewitness testimony is going to build on that body of research, right? So that's kind of what I've been building up to this whole time, is that I'm going to train this neural network that I've built, right? And I'm going to use it to show that the performance is way better on people of different races than it is on people of the same race. Yeah, showing, thereby demonstrating that the eyewitness effect in deep neural networks suffers from the same problems as the eyewitness effect in human beings. Right? All right, very cool. I'm still gonna try to see if I can connect. Okay, but I did figure out something final. I did figure out what I can do. I'm not a guy to give up with it. I don't get here by giving up. I just giving up at the first sign of trouble. So, figured out what I'm gonna do. Figured out what I'm gonna do. Maybe we can still see this thing maybe we can still see this thing in effect, right? So, I mean, I was really revved up and ready to show you guys this thing. Really, really wanted to show you this thing. I was very disappointed that this laptop is not working properly. All right, well, another 20 minutes. See if we can get this data onto this drive. Where is right. This one. Right, so everything has abandoned. Let's see. All right, let me see if I can get this thing transferred. Everybody has a thumb drive? Any thumb drive? Any flash drive? Flash drive, thumb drive? Nobody uses this stuff anymore, right? We just use we only use internet to transfer stuff these days. but with gig speeds and gig speed and why would you need to use thumb drives? All right, you might be able to see this stuff. We have this. All right, I think we might get a small taste of it, and then I'll show you guys more on Wednesday of what. All right, so the topic of today was actually supposed to be image augmentation, right? Topic of today is actually image augmentation, right? And the idea here is that image augmentation helps us to improve our accuracy by generating more data. Yeah. The idea here being that the data that we're not seeing, unseen data is going to be different from the data that we're working with, right? And so if when we augment the training data, then it will possibly look more like the data that we'll see in the validation data or the test data, right? And so the idea here is that if we can augment our data, then we will get better accuracy on our validation data. All right? All right. Now, here's a problem. I'm pretty sure that they're going to block this. Pretty sure that they're going to block this. This laptop. Oh, actually. Oh, actually, okay. All right, okay. Yeah. Oh. I didn't finish telling you about the data that I collected. Data that I collected as one more person. That's correct. You've heard me talk about it, right? Oh, no, I did have to. All right, okay. All right, turns out I had everything I wanted. All right, okay. So All right. So these are the people I collected over the weekend. Aishwarya Rai, right? Amitabh Bachchan. Tell you this guy looks the same all the time, right? I told you he looks the same all the time, right? Kate Blanchett, Idris Elba, Lucy Lawless, Prabhas, Usain Bolt. Now, I actually collected more pictures than this. But what happened is that in reality, before that, I had raw pictures, right? So I had to actually, so the pictures were raw, and then I had them cropped, right? And then I was gonna show you, we're gonna talk about image augmentation, right? And the idea of image augmentation is that prevents overfitting by enhancing the training data. The training, you generate more images in the training data, right? And it simulates more of the real world variability. So in other words, all right, if you have Aishwarya Rai, you have this picture of Aishwarya Rai, right? And you, wait, can I say the other stuff? You have pictures of Aishwarya Rai, right? And you do more things to her face. Then you're more likely to see that face in the training data, right? So in other words, you see her face looking like this in the training data. When you do this to her face, you're more likely to see this face in the validation data, right? Because in other words, her face isn't always going to look like this. Sometimes it's going to be brighter. Sometimes it's going to be more saturated. Sometimes it's going to be black and white. Sometimes it's going to be high contrast. Sometimes it might be partially covered, right? Sometimes it might just see part of the face, right? Sometimes it might be squashed, widened, faded, right? And flipped and rotated, right? Because in other words, she might be holding her face up one way versus another way, right? Sometimes her face is going to be noisy. Sometimes her face is going to be blurred. Or you might have a low resolution photo. So the point is, with image augmentation, which is this week's topic, point of image augmentation is that image augmentation allows us to generate more training data, right? And that training data has a better chance of looking like the validation data or the test data. I remember last week we talked about the fact that when you train special forces in Delhi, right? If you train them on urban warfare in Delhi, and then you bring them down to Hyderabad, they may not do as well because they've been trained on the Delhi streets, right? What image augmentation allows us to do is to simulate the data, the real world conditions that they might see, right? So anyway, so the point is that I collected this data set, and then I was going to run it on my laptop and show you the difference, the difference in accuracy with different augmentations, the difference that image augmentation makes. But that's not working out today. But another thing I need to point out about real world, one of the things that image augmentation does is allows your network to operate in more real world conditions, right? Because like I said, you're not gonna always have this perfect picture, right? The image is gonna vary in the real world, right? And so image augmentation allows you to operate more in the real world, right? Allows you to operate more in the real world. Allows you to operate more in the real world, right? real-world variability makes models more resilient to edge cases. Edge cases being, for example, cases where, okay, let's say, you have a low resolution photo of Aishwarya Rai. You should still be able to recognize her, right? And by having a low res, because what image augmentation essentially does is it adds these extra images to the training data, yeah? And these are some of the transformations that we do with image augmentation. The other thing about real world variability is that we don't always have an exact picture of the perfect face. I mean, exact picture of just the face, right? And so one of the things we need to do in real life is to do face cropping. We need to be able to do face cropping. And so I'm going to show you the original images that I had. I'm going to show you the original images. And then one of the things that happens is that one of the things that I had to do was to one of the things I had to do was to, the problem is that I was working on the data of the last night. So I was working on data of the last night, so the data is not on the Google folder. Okay. Hold on a second. Give me 1 second. Yeah, and so one of the things we had to do was to crop, right? So the cropping, right, to get just the face, right? And then also had to do some cropping, right? Because I manually collected these images off the internet, right? Right? Manually collected these images off the internet. And then also had to standardize them on, had to standardize the dimensions. So to let me show you one last thing, and then we look at the cropping first, right? And then right. So the images started like this, right? Right. So they started like this. It's not all the images. Because program I was working with wasn't able to convert all the images. So they started like this, and then they ended up like this, right? So in other words, you start with the regular pictures, right? And then have them cropped down to just the face alone, right? And then also very importantly, had them standardized to, I think it was 384 by 384, right? So they should all be standardized to 384 by 384, right? 384 by 384 pixels. If you look at the bottom, you can see the pixels. 384 by 384. Right. So before I fed them to the network, I have to standardize them to 384 by 384. Right? It's one of the things you have to do in the real world. So you have to crop the face, crop to the face only. Right? And then you standardize it, the dimensions. That's before you feed it to the network. I would try to run the program. I would try to run the model, but it's not going to work out today. But yeah, but anyway, this is my special little data set that I made over the weekend. Of basically 1,000 pictures, starting with these real world pictures, right? And then the facial cropping, but not all the pictures actually survive. Not all the pictures survive. They're all 384 by 384 by the time it started into training and validation, right? Not all of them actually survive. But yeah, this is my special little data set. Probus, and then you have them cropped down to the face alone, right? I was actually able to get 73% validation accuracy at that trainer network. All right, very cool. So these are some rework issues you have to deal with when you're dealing with photos. You have to deal with cropping. You have to deal with standardization of the faces to a certain resolution, right? Because these are different resolutions, obviously, right? This is 3072 by 4080, right? Now, by the way, one of the things I realized, Prabhas has the best expressions ever, right? In interviews, right? Has the best expressions. Right? Like this thing he does, and he squinches up his nose. Very interesting, right? Right? And so on and so forth. I was gonna show you the effect of overfitting when you have the data from the same. One of the problems with faces is that people age. They're in different scenes, different lighting, etc., right? And this is one of the reasons why you need image augmentation. Yeah, because by augmenting the images, you by the way, you're not going to see the augmented images in the training set. They're generated at training time. We're going to see something called a data generator, which feeds the model these augmented images at training time, right? One of the things about the data generator is that you don't have to generate all of these extra images and have them sitting on the hard drive, because that's going to take up a lot more space. It generates it at training time, which saves you drive space, right? And then also you can vary which and then the other problem with generating a whole mass of images and leaving them on the training on the drive and then using them to train is that you don't know which augmentations are going to work at training time, right? And so it's better to generate the augmentations at training time, right? Right? So you can kind of experiment with different augmentations to see which ones work best. All right, people, that's all the time. Let's see who is here today. Let's see who is here in this group. Canvas up. No, I did have Canvas up. Now, I gotta tell you something. I may not be able to take that in because my phone is still down. It's gonna send me a. Okay, all right. No, actually, we can take that in. All right, let's go to Canvas and let's all right, yeah. So the point though is, so the other point I wanted to make is, if you want to work on this project with me, then let me know. Because I think it's going to be an interesting little project. Proving that neural networks recognize people from different races better than it recognizes people from the same race. All right,